Welcome painters! Today's video is the second part of how to paint an ultramarine, and I will use the brush. So if you already have your paints ready, let's go for it! Let's continue painting this ultramarine. Today I will use the brush, an Artis Opus size 00. First of all, we put all of the colors on the wet palette. I will use blue ink and black. You may be wondering why I am using an ink, so I will explain. The inks are more fluid and will help the paint enter all the recesses and holes. So, jot that down. I mix blue ink with a little bit of black. Now we have to paint all the recesses. It's a very long process, but it's very worth it, because we are going to define all the armor plates. So, with a lot of patience, we paint all those areas. Look in the box how I unload the brush. I often get asked about if I unload it on a sheet of paper or on the palette. I unload it on the palette. I take some paint and twist the brush to unload it on the palette, so I have this perfect amount to paint the desired area. In the recesses, in this case. And the process is very simple. Paint every recess patiently. If you go too far, don't worry. Clean the brush and then correct it. As you can see, I am just playing with blue ink, or with the mixture of both. Some parts need more darkness, so I add more black. And some other areas need less darkness, so I only use blue ink. I combine both. And, as I always say, the more layers you apply, the more intense the color gets. So, we paint more layers, let it dry, and then repeat. And here you can see the final result of how I outlined all the recesses. Next step, I will paint all the edges of this ultramarine. First of all, put all the colors on the wet palette. I am using the same colors that I used in the first video. For those of you who are new to the channel, here's a link to that video. Also, if you're a subscriber and still didn't watch it, I urge you to go watch it since I explained why I am using these colors. Well, let's get on with it. I mixed these two colors you see in the box. I will not tell you their names because I told you in the first video, so go take a look. Well, I mix and paint the edges. Notice how I tilt the figure a bit, and then I use the side of the brush to paint the edges. This will make it much easier for us to paint them. And as I always say, go slowly. This is an arduous step, so we have to do it slowly with no stress. Look at this area as I tilt the Mini, and then with very little paint on the brush, I rest paint on the edge and then drag it. This way, I achieve a thin outline. We are looking for a thin outline because we painted this Mini with the airbrush. So, if we did a very thick outline, the difference between both tools will show up so much. So, I recommend you always take a little paint and go slowly so that the work with the airbrush and the brush is not such a noticeable difference. Little by little, the armor plates are being defined. Look at the leg. How we are adding definition to the figure. And it's just a mixture of blue and the blue... I will not say its name. Well, it's sky blue. I combine a mixture. I add more sky blue to some areas to make it stand out a bit more. I recommend you using a good brush with a fine point. One where the bristles aren't all splayed open. If so, you'll find it very difficult to paint the edges. Pay close attention as I rest paint on the edge and then drag it. On the upper parts, I add more sky blue to make it stand out more. Remember that I will record some videos about color theory very soon. Some of you requested that, and I think it would be so useful. Also, a video in which I explain where to put the highlights and the shadows. So, I think that in a few weeks I'll be able to record those videos and publish them on the channel. And any suggestions are welcome. Let me know in the comments. And I also want to ask you a favor. If you like the video, share it with your friends. That helps me a lot to continue seeing people's interest. Look at how I highlight this part. I paint the edge and then add some brightness. The helmet, the same, under the eye. I highlight it to make it stand out more. Don't be afraid, just paint the edges. If you make a mistake, don't worry. Clean the brush and then fix it. The shoulder pads. Look how I tilt the figure, rest the brush on the edge, and drag. I always use the side of the brush. Using the side of the brush is the way we will achieve good results. I will add some more sky blue to emphasize it more. Look how easy it is to paint the edges. Very little paint, rest, and drag. I highlight the upper part of the shoulder pad a bit more. I will add a highlight here to emphasize this. Here, I will highlight this edge more. And as I always say, go slowly and see where more light is needed. The helmet needs more highlights. If I go too far, I add some black and correct it. Here you can see the final result of highlighting the edges. Third step, I will highlight the edges a bit more. I will use a bit of green-gray mixed with a little sky blue. I will add soft touches to highlight a bit more. For example, on the helmet I am highlighting the highest parts, since it's a very important focal point. I also highlight the edges of the breastplate, and as you can see, very smooth movements. Don't rush. Notice that I load very little paint to get a good outline. Rest the paint on the edge and drag it. Pay close attention in the box, how I unload the paint. Take a little, twist the brush like this, and then start painting. This step is very necessary, since we have to highlight this part a bit more. A little bit on the belt, too. Also, on the knee pad. And notice that little by little, these extreme highlights are already becoming noticeable. Notice the contrast on the foot. And we still have to add a couple of shadows later. I outline under this edge. I feel like a surgeon. Come on, keep highlighting. The green-gray is perfect to highlight blue. Some extra touches are needed on the shoulder pad. Also, highlight the edge. I'll also highlight a bit on the side. But I am not using green-gray, but rather sky blue and a bit of the previous color. This is taking shape. We are getting a cool marine. This edge on the chest is also important. To define this plate better, turn the figure a little and use the side of the brush. You see, it's super simple. This forearm needs a bit more highlighting. It is an upper part, so I will add more light. Here you can see the final result. Those sparkles improve the figure a lot. Fourth step, we will paint shadows. I will put a bit of black, blue ink, and hull red on the palette. This color is perfect to add tones to this blue. Mix everything a little. You can see in the box, there is a place with more black, another with more blue and hull red, and with the blue ink I make a mixture there, and then depending on the part I am shading, I will use one or another. On the deepest parts, I will use more black and blue ink, and where I want to add tones, I will use hull red with blue more. Here, we have to play with the colors. For example, I like adding some reddish color on the feet, so I add more hull red to the mix. I apply it like a glaze. The paint is more diluted, and I rest paint on the surface, wet the brush, and clean it a bit to blend it. Notice it blends super easy. As you can see, we already achieved a strong contrast. This part needs a little more shade, too. This step is also much needed because we have to define the plates more. The truth is, these Space Marines are so useful to explain how to paint figures. The volumes are great. And now, soon, I don't know when, but I'll paint either a Space Wolf or an Imperial Fist. I'm not sure which one to start first. What do you think? Which one should I start with? Space Wolf or Imperial Fist? Let me know in the comments. I keep explaining and painting more shadows. I use more hull red on the backpack to give it more tones. The shoulder pad, if you look, the lower part is super dark. Here I add more black and blue ink to give it more depth. I also add a bit more on the feet. Under the knee, I add a little more hull red, too. I mix hull red and ink, which I'll use on this part that needs a little bit more shade. Here you can see the final result. With these shadows, the figure looks much better. Last step. Magical touches, the most important step, which is adding magic to our miniature. A very necessary step. I will highlight the edges a bit more and add points of light to make the figure stand out much more. I will use green-gray to highlight more, for example, on the highest parts of the head, and on the shoulder pad the same. I do some very soft, light touches. Considering we painted this figure with the airbrush, and then are finishing it with the brush, if we put very strong brush strokes, the difference between both tools will clash, so we have to apply very fine paint. I mark the side edges a bit more. If I realize that the green-gray is too strong, I go back to the previous color to soften it. That's why it's very good to have a wet palette. The colors always stay fresh. I highlight this edge more. A little here, a little point of light. I also outline the belt more. I add a point of light on the knee pad, the same thing on the foot. You see, by adding soft touches, it changes a lot. These points of light help a lot. And here is the final result. I hope you like this video a lot. If you love it, give it a like, please. Did you find the process easy? Let me know your opinions in the comments. The Artist Opus Company, which is very happy with this channel, sent me some brushes to hold a raffle. To participate, you must leave a comment on this video and also subscribe to the channel. And, if you want to help me grow the channel, share this video with your friends. Hit the like button, and ring the bell to be notified about the next video. And don't forget that there is a full list of the products that I use in the video description. If you live in Spain, you can get them all at Goblin Trader, in France at Hobby Shop, and in the United Kingdom at Element Games. Folks, see you in the next video.